The ocean floor holds a history of commerce far older than any written map. Long before satellites or compasses, ancient civilizations were connected by a web of underwater trade routes, hidden highways that carried more than just goods across the deep. By the end of this exploration, you will see the ancient world not as isolated kingdoms, but as a surprisingly interconnected global network. We will walk the drowned docks of sunken ports and examine cargo from shipwrecks that reveal forgotten alliances. How did sailors navigate vast, empty seas without any modern instruments? And what precious commodity was so valuable it fueled the exploration of entire coastlines? What forgotten connection between distant cultures still shapes the world we live in today? Think of the ancient Mediterranean or the Indian Ocean, not as empty blue space on a map, but as a buzzing, interconnected web of liquid highways. For early civilizations, the sea was not a wall but a door, and the key to opening it was understanding the rhythms of nature itself. Maritime archaeologists like Dr. Sean Kingsley remind us that the seabed is the world's greatest preserved museum, its silent artifacts holding the stories of these bustling commercial networks. The routes were not drawn on any chart. Instead, they were written in the stars, felt in the shift of the wind, and memorized in the color of the water and the shape of distant headlands. Sailors relied on predictable currents, like nature's conveyor belts, and seasonal monsoon winds that reversed direction with clockwork regularity, allowing for round-trip voyages across astonishing distances. These pathways became so well-traveled they formed mental maps, passed from experienced captain to apprentice over countless generations. This knowledge was a civilization's most valuable trade secret, more precious than any cargo, because it was the very mechanism that made the cargo move. Recognizing this transforms our entire view of history. We stop seeing ancient Egypt, Mesopotamia, or the Indus Valley as isolated cradles of civilization and start to see them as nodes in a vast, pulsating network, linked by these invisible maritime threads. The goods changed hands, but so did ideas, technologies, and stories, all riding the same currents. To walk on land is to see history in fragments, in the ruins of a single city. But to look at the sea is to see the connections between them all. So what did these ships actually carry across the deep, and what can a single sunken cargo tell us about the world that built it? The evidence for this ancient network is etched in stone and clay, found in the ruins of a port city that should not have existed. In what is now Gujarat, India, a sophisticated dockyard was constructed around 2,400 years before the Common Era. This was Lothal, the maritime heart of the Indus Valley civilization. Here, a massive brick-lined basin was engineered with a lock-gate system to control water levels, allowing ships to dock safely regardless of the tides. It was a hub of staggering activity where goods from across the subcontinent were gathered for journeys across the Arabian Sea. The Indus people were not just traders, they were pioneers of oceanic commerce, exporting finely crafted carnelian beads, vibrant cotton textiles, and precious teak timber to distant shores. But how do we know their ships reached those far coasts? The proof is in the small things. In the ruins of Mesopotamian cities like archaeologists have found distinctive square seals stamped with Indus script and animal motifs. Conversely, in Indus cities, they have discovered weights standardized to the Mesopotamian system. Even more telling, on the coast of Oman, Indus-style weights and pottery fragments have been unearthed, marking a clear stopping point on a maritime route between two worlds. These were not accidental landfalls, they were the results of planned, repeated voyages. Their vessels, likely built from bundled reeds or early wooden hulls stitched together with rope, were far more seaworthy than we might assume, capable of riding the monsoon winds to carry their precious cargo. To stand at Lothal's ancient dock is to witness the birth of globalization, a testament to human ingenuity in conquering the sea, yet it prompts a haunting question. The Indus Valley civilization, with its planned cities and vast trade networks, eventually faded from history. How could such an advanced maritime culture decline? And what intricate knowledge of currents, stars, and foreign ports vanished beneath the waves with its last sailors? The silence of Lothal is a reminder that these connections were fragile, sustained by knowledge that could be lost. Across the Arabian Sea and centuries later, another civilization mastered the art of the maritime network, turning an entire sea into their economic domain. On the island of Crete, the Minoans did not just build palaces, they built an empire of waves, a thalassocracy whose power flowed from its control of the sea lanes. Their capital, Knossos, was not merely a royal residence but a bustling redistribution center, its storerooms overflowing with treasures that whispered of distant shores. Inside, vibrant frescoes depict sleek, graceful ships with dozens of oars, vessels that were the lifeblood of their society. The artifacts found within the palace walls tell the story of their reach: Egyptian ivory carved into delicate figurines, Syrian tin essential for forging bronze, and amber from the distant Baltic, each item a testament to a voyage completed. Their trade routes were the superhighways of the Bronze Age Mediterranean, creating a cultural web that connected Crete to the copper mines of Cyprus, the gold of Egypt, and the ports of Anatolia. This exchange moved far beyond raw materials. Minoan artistic styles, with their flowing natural forms and depictions of bull leaping, influenced art across the region. Elements of their advanced architecture, like light wells and intricate plumbing, spread. Even early writing systems traveled with the merchants, facilitating contracts and inventories across linguistic barriers. The sea was their unifying force, making the Mediterranean not a separator of cultures, but a mixer of them. Perhaps the most stunning proof of this intricate system lies not on land, but 60 meters beneath the surface off the coast of Uluburun, Turkey. Here, a ship from the 14th century before the Common Era rests on the seabed, a perfectly preserved time capsule of Bronze Age globalization. When archaeologists carefully excavated the site, they uncovered a cargo so diverse it reads like a manifest of the ancient world. There were 10 tons of Cypriot copper ingots, shaped like ox hides for easy transport. There were logs of precious ebony from Africa, jars filled with terebinth resin from Canaan, glass ingots from Mesopotamia, and golden jewelry from Egypt. The personal belongings of the crew were equally multinational, including seals from Mycenaean Greece, a stone mace head from the Balkans, and a writing tablet from Assyria. This single shipwreck, the Uluburun, is undeniable physical evidence. It was not a Minoan vessel, but likely a Canaanite trader operating within the Minoan-inspired network, carrying goods from a dozen different civilizations all on one journey. It proves these routes were systematic, reliable, and frequent enough for a merchant to assemble such an international cargo. The ship itself was a floating marketplace, a microcosm of a connected world long before the concept of a map. Each ingot and artifact pulled from the silt is a silent witness to a complex, organized system of exchange that fueled the brilliance of the Bronze Age. So if a single ship could connect empires, what does a network of thousands of such voyages over centuries ultimately create? It forges something more permanent than trade goods. It builds a shared world of ideas, and sometimes it plants the seeds for a single legendary city to rise from the myths. The color of empire was not gold, but a deep, resonant purple. To produce just a single gram of the legendary Tyrian purple, dye required the careful harvesting and processing of thousands of a specific sea snail, Murex brandaris, found in the coastal waters of the eastern Mediterranean. The labor was immense. The smell from the rotting shellfish was famously foul, but the result was a color that did not fade. instead growing richer with time and sunlight. It became synonymous with power, royalty, and divine right, a luxury so potent it was literally worth its weight in silver, and the masters of this crimson secret were the Phoenicians. Emerging from the coastal city-states like Tyre and Sidon in what is now Lebanon, they were not conquerors of vast inland territories, but the ultimate maritime middlemen, the undisputed navigators of the ancient world. Their greatest legacy was not an empire of land, but an empire of connection, a sprawling network of trade colonies and ports that stretched from their homeland all the way to the Atlantic shores of Spain and beyond. They founded outposts that would become mighty cities in their own right, like Carthage in North Africa and Cadiz in southern Spain, not as settlements for conquest, but as secure way stations and trading hubs to control the flow of goods. The scale of their purple dye operation is still visible today, not in grand palaces, but in submerged ruins along the Levantine coast. Underwater archaeologists have discovered the remains of industrial installations, stone vats cut into the bedrock near the shoreline, where millions of snails were processed in a cycle of harvesting and production that lasted for centuries. Nearby, enormous mounds of crushed shells called middens pile up like ancient landfills, silent testimony to the staggering volume of life sacrificed for this singular color. This was not a cottage industry, it was a mass production enterprise fueling a global luxury market. The wealth generated from this one commodity financed everything. It built their famous fleets of nimble, cedar-built ships capable of long open water voyages. It paid for expeditions down the coast of Africa and possibly north to Britain in search of tin and other raw materials. The pursuit of markets for their purple cloth and the quest for goods to trade for it became the engine that drove the systematic exploration and mapping of the entire Mediterranean basin and the Atlantic fringe. So we must ask, what begins as a simple quest for a beautiful color? It builds trade routes, funds voyages into the unknown, and establishes the first prototype of a commercial colony, stitching continents together through the simple, powerful language of supply and demand. But luxury goods like purple dye traveled along established highways. What about the essential bulk commodities that fed and fueled entire civilizations, the invisible cargo that moved on a scale we can barely comprehend? While purple dye clothed kings, another commodity forged the very tools of civilization. Bronze was the supermaterial of the ancient world, the alloy that built weapons, armor, sculptures, and tools. But to make bronze, you needed two metals, copper and tin. Copper was relatively common, found in deposits across Cyprus and the Mediterranean. Tin, however, was astonishingly rare. Only a handful of places on Earth held significant deposits, and the two most important were separated by a continent. One source was in the rugged highlands of ancient Afghanistan, the other in the remote, misty cliffs of Cornwall at the southwestern tip of Britain. This scarcity created one of history's greatest logistical puzzles. How did this essential metal travel thousands of miles from its source to the smithies of Mesopotamia, Egypt, and Greece? The answer lies in a web of routes so long and complex they defy belief. From Afghanistan, tin likely began a perilous overland journey, carried by donkey caravans along the Silk Road precursors, through mountain passes and across deserts to reach the ports of the Persian Gulf or the Levant. From Cornwall, the mystery deepens. Historians have long debated the pathways. One theory suggests a daring Atlantic route, where Phoenician or even earlier Celtic traders sailed north from their Spanish colonies, braving the treacherous Bay of Biscay to reach the British Isles directly. Another proposes a slower, incremental chain of local trade, where tin was passed hand to hand along the coast of France and through river networks, eventually reaching the Mediterranean. For centuries, this was pure speculation. Then, modern science provided a key. Researchers now use a technique called isotopic analysis. Like a chemical fingerprint, the specific isotopes of elements like tin within a bronze artifact can be matched to the unique geological signature of its original mine. Suddenly, ancient bronze objects began to tell their own stories. A Mycenaean sword found in Greece might reveal tin from Cornwall. A Mesopotamian statuette could trace its origin to the mines of Afghanistan. This scientific detective work is actively mapping those invisible highways. It confirms that these were not occasional, adventurous trips, but structured, sustained supply chains. The tin trade was the lifeblood of Bronze Age societies, a silent necessity that drove exploration, fostered contact between wildly different cultures, and created interdependencies across staggering distances. A king's power and a city's security literally depended on the safe arrival of a rare metal from a land he would never see, transported by people he would never meet. It was a network built on absolute necessity, yet for all the importance of these material goods, the most profound cargo carried on these ancient ships left no physical trace at all. It was not something you could weigh in a balance or store in a jar. The most famous trade route in history was not the only one. While caravans of camels plodded across the deserts of Central Asia along the Silk Road, a far more capacious and equally ancient highway was carrying its own riches across the Indian Ocean. This was the Maritime Silk Road, a monsoon-driven network of sea lanes that connected the Roman Empire with the kingdoms of India and Southeast Asia. Its existence is captured in a remarkable document known as the Periplus of the Erythraean Sea, a Greek sailor's practical guidebook from the 1st century of the Common Era. It reads like a merchant's manual, listing ports from the Red Sea down the coast of Africa and across to India, detailing what goods to buy and sell in each location, the local customs, and even the best times to sail. It was a roadmap for profit, written by someone who had traveled these waters extensively, proving this was not an occasional adventure but a regular, scheduled commerce. The scale of exchange was staggering. From Roman Egypt, ships laden with gold and silver coins, fine glassware, and wine set sail with the summer monsoon winds, arriving at bustling Indian ports like Muziris on the southwestern coast. There, they traded for the true treasures of the East, black pepper that was worth its weight in silver in Rome, brilliant gemstones, fragrant spices like cinnamon and cardamom, and exquisite Chinese silk that had already traveled overland to reach the Indian coast. The physical evidence is undeniable. Hordes of Roman gold coins bearing the faces of emperors like Augustus and Tiberius have been unearthed by farmers in southern India, a direct testament to the vast wealth flowing eastward. In the ruins of Pompeii, archaeologists have found peppercorns preserved in the volcanic ash, a tiny, poignant reminder of a taste for luxury that spanned the entire known world. So we must ask, why does the overland Silk Road dominate our imagination when its maritime counterpart moved greater volumes of these precious goods? The answer may lie in visibility. The land route left behind caravanserais, oasis towns, and visible tracks across the sands. The sea route, however, swallowed its evidence. Ports silted up and were abandoned, ships sank to the silent deep, and the monsoon winds left no permanent mark. Yet the sheer quantity of Roman coins in India tells a different story, one of a trade so massive it could influence entire economies. This reframes our view of the classical world. It was not just connected by dusty trails across continents, but by a pulsating, liquid network of ships that turned the Indian Ocean into a single, sprawling marketplace. But if spices and silk were flowing west, what was traveling east in return, and what forgotten technologies made these incredibly long and dangerous voyages not just possible, but routine? The true scale of this maritime world is written not on maps, but on the seafloor itself, in the silent stone of sunken ports. These were the vital nodes in the network, the bustling gateways where goods were loaded, crews rested, and cultures collided. One of the most evocative is Pavlopetri off the coast of southern Greece. Submerged for over 3,000 years, its streets and buildings remain perfectly laid out, a snapshot of a Bronze Age harbor town frozen in time. The orderly plan of homes, courtyards, and tombs reveals a sophisticated community whose entire existence was oriented toward the sea. Its gradual drowning, due to rising sea levels and seismic activity, acted as a perfect preservative, sealing it under layers of sand and shielding it from later disturbances. This phenomenon is not unique. All across the Mediterranean and beyond, ancient coastlines have retreated, swallowing the very hubs that made long-distance trade possible. This submergence, while a tragedy for its inhabitants, has given archaeologists an unparalleled opportunity, using tools like side-scan sonar to create images of the seabed and photogrammetry to build precise three-dimensional models from thousands of photographs. Researchers can now map these drowned cities without moving a single stone. The ghostly outlines that emerge show the full infrastructure of ancient globalization: massive stone quays where ships tied up, long, rectangular foundations of warehouses that once held amphorae of oil and wine, and even narrow, roofed ramps known as ship sheds, where vessels were hauled ashore for maintenance and protection from storms. These were not simple landing spots, they were feats of maritime engineering, built to service a constant flow of oceanic traffic. Perhaps no discovery illustrates this better than the legendary city of Heracleion, known as Thonis to the ancient Egyptians. For centuries, it was thought to be a myth, a wealthy port at the mouth of the Nile mentioned by historians like Herodotus. Then, in the late 1990s, a team led by underwater archaeologist Frank Gaudio found it, buried under meters of sediment in the Abu Qir Bay. The site is breathtaking, a vast underwater museum frozen in time. Colossal statues of a pharaoh and the god Hapi, the deity of the Nile flood, stand sentinel on the seabed. Dozens of limestone sarcophagi that once held the mummified remains of sacred animals lie scattered. Most telling are the giant stone steels, covered in inscriptions, that decreed the taxes and rules for trade, proving Heracleion was the mandatory customs gateway for all Greek ships entering Egypt. This was the bureaucratic heart of a maritime empire, a place where commerce was regulated, wealth was counted, and cultures officially met. To see these monuments on the ocean floor, still standing where they fell, is to understand that these ports were more than just docks. They were the cosmopolitan capitals of the ancient sea, melting pots where the world's goods and ideas officially came ashore. But if the ports were the gateways and the ships were the vehicles, what was the invisible force that guided them across trackless waters? The ancient equivalent of a satellite navigation system that every captain from the Mediterranean to the Indian Ocean had to master. The compass was still centuries away from invention, yet ancient mariners regularly crossed thousands of miles of open ocean. Their navigation system was not built of metal, but of memory, observation, and a profound, intimate dialogue with the natural world. They sailed by reading a living map written in the sky, the sea, and the air itself. In the vast Pacific, Polynesian voyagers perfected this art to an astonishing degree, a practice known as wayfinding. Master navigator Nainoa Thompson of Hawaii describes it as a constant process of observation, of seeing the ocean and the sky in 100 different ways. The wayfinder did not simply look at the stars, he knew them as moving beacons. He memorized the precise point on the horizon where specific stars would rise and set for each destination, creating a celestial compass. But the stars were only part of the map. During the day or under cloudy skies, other clues became critical. The pattern of ocean swells refracted around islands could be felt through the hull of the canoe, telling an experienced navigator if land was near long before it was visible. The flight paths of certain seabirds at dusk could point the way home. At night, the glow of bioluminescence in the water might indicate specific current lines. This was not guesswork, it was a rigorous, generations-deep science of environmental cues, a database of knowledge carried in the mind. In the Mediterranean and other seas, sailors employed similar, if less expansive, techniques. They used sounding leads, simple weights lowered on a marked line, to do two crucial things. First, they measured the depth, warning of shallow water. Second, and more ingeniously, the bottom of the lead was hollowed out and filled with tallow, a sticky animal fat. When hauled up, it brought a sample of the seabed, sand, mud, gravel, or shells. An experienced captain could literally feel his location by the texture under his feet, matching the sample to a mental chart of the coastal floor. This was how they navigated familiar routes in poor visibility, by touching the hidden landscape below. These methods reveal a truth we often overlook. Ancient cultures possessed a granular, holistic understanding of their environment that functioned as a perfect technology for its time. It was a knowledge so complete it allowed humans to settle the most remote islands on Earth. Yet, with the advent of magnetic compasses and later instruments, much of this experiential wisdom faded, preserved only in a few oral traditions. Today, as we rediscover these non-instrumental techniques, we are not just learning about navigation, we are recovering a different way of seeing the world, one where humanity was not separate from nature but an integral, listening part of it. What does it mean that the greatest explorers in history found their way not by looking down at a dial, but by looking up at the infinite sky and feeling the rhythm of the waves? But the cargo of the ancient world was not measured in weight alone. Divers exploring the shallow waters off the coast of Italy, near the site of an old Greek colony, have brought up something unexpected, not amphorae or ingots, but beautifully crafted bronze statues of gods and athletes, resting silently on the sandy bottom for over 2,000 years. These were not lost in a shipwreck, they were placed there intentionally, offerings to the sea gods for a safe voyage or in gratitude for one completed. Similar finds appear across the Mediterranean, from Canaanite figurines deposited near the ancient port of Ashkelon to small stone anchors carved with sacred symbols found along busy trade routes. This reveals a profound layer to these maritime networks. Trade was never just an economic transaction, it was a spiritual journey. The ships that carried spices, metals, and textiles also carried belief, their holds packed with small portable altars, protective amulets, and household icons destined for foreign shrines or the private devotions of merchants far from home. This exchange of sacred objects acted as a quiet mission, spreading religious ideas from one culture to another with every docking. A merchant might purchase a statuette of a foreign deity as a curiosity, or as a potent new form of protection for his risky profession. Over time, that deity could find a home in a new city, its cult adopted and adapted by local worshippers. Perhaps the most powerful example of this is the journey of the Egyptian goddess Isis. Originally a deity of magic, motherhood, and protection, her worship began to travel beyond the Nile on the ships of Phoenician and Greek traders. Small faience amulets depicting Isis nursing her son Horus have been found in ports across the Mediterranean. As her fame grew, so did her attributes, absorbing qualities from local goddesses she encountered. By the time of the Roman Empire, she had transformed into a universal savior goddess, a patron of sailors and the starry sea itself, with magnificent temples in port cities like Rome's own Ostia. Her cult spread not by conquest or decree, but along the same bustling maritime highways that carried grain from Egypt and marble from Greece. It is a stunning thought, the most personal of human expressions, faith, hitched a ride on the same currents and monsoon winds that moved sacks of pepper and bars of silver. The ancient sailor, facing the terrifying power of the open ocean, sought favor from every power available, creating a fluid, interconnected world of the spirit that mirrored the interconnected world of commerce. So we must wonder, if gods could travel by ship and find new homes, what other intangible essences were being traded? What stories, philosophies, and ways of seeing the world were being whispered in foreign ports, slowly reshaping the ancient mind itself. The warmth of the Mediterranean sun fell on a treasure that had begun its journey in the cold mists of the north. Amber, that golden fossilized resin of ancient pine forests, washed onto Baltic shores as a gift from the sea, a substance that captured light and even insects from a world millions of years gone. To the civilizations of the south, it was magic made solid, believed to hold protective and medicinal powers, and it became one of the most sought-after luxuries in the ancient world. Its journey south was not a single road but a sprawling network of pathways now called the Amber Road, a testament to how desire for a single beautiful object could weave continents together. This was not a paved highway but a shifting combination of river routes and coastal sea lanes, where raw amber nuggets were passed from hand to hand, from Baltic traders to Central European intermediaries, eventually reaching the sophisticated markets of the Roman Empire. The historian Pliny the Elder, in his Natural History, noted the Romans' fascination with this northern gold, and he recorded the exhaustive land journey one equestrian explorer made to procure it, a trip that underscored both its value and the mystery of its origin. But the most compelling evidence for this trade lies not in texts but beneath the waves. In the Adriatic Sea, shipwrecks from the Roman era have been found with raw amber blocks still in their holds, cargoes interrupted on the final leg of their long voyage from the Baltic coast to workshops in Italy. These sunken shipments prove that the final, most efficient segment of the Amber Road was maritime, with ships hugging the coastline to deliver their precious freight. Modern science allows us to trace this journey with incredible precision. Because amber is an organic material, its chemical signature is unique to the forest that produced it. Through a technique called infrared spectroscopy, researchers can analyze a finished amber bead found in a Mycenaean tomb or a Roman villa and match it definitively to the specific Baltic shore where the resin first fossilized. This is the silent testimony of the object itself, confirming that the necklace gracing a Mediterranean noblewoman originated over 1,000 miles away, in a land she would have considered the very edge of the world. This sustained transcontinental network, fueled entirely by a natural resource with no practical use, reshapes our understanding of ancient economics. It reveals a supply chain driven purely by aesthetic and spiritual desire, a chain that connected hunter-gatherers on Baltic beaches with the elite of classical civilizations, creating a dialogue of value across a vast and varied landscape. The story of amber is a powerful reminder that the threads connecting the ancient world were spun from many different materials, some as hard as bronze and others as ephemeral as a shared belief. But what happens when the most vital thread in the entire network, the one that carries the food that feeds empires, suddenly snaps? The most prized color in the ancient world was not a dye but a stone. Lapis lazuli, with its deep celestial blue speckled with golden pyrite like a starry night sky, was found in only one place on Earth, the remote and rugged mountains of Badakhshan in what is now Afghanistan. Yet, thousands of miles away, this same stone adorned the death mask of the boy King Tutankhamun, formed the sacred beards of Sumerian statues, and was carved into cylinder seals for Mesopotamian royalty. Its journey from a single mountain valley to the tombs of pharaohs is one of history's most astonishing supply chains, a testament to how the desire for a symbol could forge pathways across continents and seas. To acquire it, merchants and middlemen constructed a network that may have begun over 4,000 years before the Common Era, a route so valuable it became etched into the cultural memory of multiple civilizations. The stone likely began its trek on the backs of donkeys or camels, traveling southwest through the harsh landscapes of Iran toward the great cities of the Indus Valley, like Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro. There, at bustling ports like Lothal, the overland journey met the maritime world. The the precious cargo was loaded onto ships that caught the monsoon winds sailing across the Arabian Sea. Some vessels may have turned north into the Persian Gulf, delivering Lapis to the Sumerian city of Ur. Others continued, braving the waters of the Red Sea to reach the docks of Egypt. This was not a simple point-to-point trade, but a relay race of value where the stone changed hands and transport methods multiple times, each leg of the journey adding to its cost and mystique. Its value was never merely monetary. In ancient Egypt, this blue was associated with the heavens and the hair of their gods. It symbolized divine favor and eternal truth. This is why Tutankhamun's golden mask, one of the most iconic artifacts ever discovered, features eyebrows and eyeliner inlaid with solid lapis lazuli. The stone was not an accessory, it was a necessary component for transforming the king's image into that of a god, ensuring his safe passage to the afterlife. In Mesopotamia, it was similarly sacred, used for the eyes of statues to make them see with divine power, and carved into seals that marked the documents of kings. The immense effort expended to bring this stone from a single Afghan valley to the Nile and the Tigris-Euphrates tells us that ancient trade was often driven by something deeper than utility. It was driven by a need for the symbolic, for the material representation of power, faith, and cosmic order. The presence of lapis lazuli in a pharaoh's tomb is a silent marker of a connected world, a single thread of brilliant blue stitching together mountains, deserts, and open ocean. It makes you wonder what other journeys, just as perilous and just as purposeful, have been forgotten because their cargo was less durable than stone. The silent floor of the Mediterranean holds moments frozen in catastrophe. Off the northern coast of Cyprus, a sponge diver named Andreas Kariolu was working in clear waters in 1965 when his eyes caught a shape that was not rock or reef. It was the gentle curve of a wooden hull resting on the sandy bottom at a depth of 30 meters, surrounded by a field of ceramic jars. He had discovered the Kyrenia ship, a merchant vessel that sank around 300 years before the Common Era, a perfectly preserved time capsule from the age of Alexander the Great. When archaeologists meticulously excavated the site over the following years, they were not just recovering a wreck, they were opening a single day in the life of the ancient economy. The ship itself, painstakingly raised and preserved, tells a detailed story of construction and repair. Its planks were made of Aleppo pine, while its frames were of oak, wood types that helped trace its origin. More telling were the clues of a long working life, with patches and replacements from at least 4 different timber harvests, showing this was a veteran of the trade routes maintained for decades. The cargo was a merchant's working inventory, nearly 400 amphorae, most from the island of Rhodes, still containing the residue of almonds and wine. There were 29 millstones for grinding grain, a practical commodity, and then the personal effects, the crew's small world, bronze coins, wooden spoons, ceramic plates, and even the crew's last meal, olive pits and fish bones. This is the unparalleled power of a shipwreck as a historical source. It is an unbiased snapshot of a single voyage, captured in a moment of crisis. Unlike a city, which accumulates layers over centuries, a wreck represents one specific trip, one specific set of economic decisions. It freezes the mundane reality of global trade, the nuts, the wine, the grindstones, alongside the human stories of the people who moved them. To understand the data, scientists use methods like dendrochronology, the study of tree rings. Each timber has a unique pattern of wide and narrow rings, a fingerprint of the climate conditions during its growth. By matching the pattern from the ship's planks to master chronologies built from ancient wood across the region, researchers can pinpoint not just when the tree was cut, but often the specific forest it came from. For the Kyrenia ship, this analysis confirmed its long service life and helped map its probable route along the Anatolian coast. So we must ask, What can this one small Greek merchant ship tell us that a grand palace on land cannot? It speaks of daily life and economic resilience, showing how ordinary traders connected a fragmented world after Alexander's empire dissolved. It reveals technological exchange in its mixed construction materials, sourced from different places. Its cargo, a combination of bulk goods and luxury items, paints a picture of a diversified, risk-spreading trade strategy. The shipwreck offers a view from the deck, not the throne room, a ground-level look at the networks that truly held the ancient world together. Each amphora raised from the seabed is a message in a bottle from the past, but to read it fully, we must also listen to the stories told by the people who never set sail, the coastal communities whose entire existence was shaped by the rhythm of arriving and departing ships. The silent legacy of these routes is not only in the tombs of kings, but on our own dinner plates. While precious stones and purple cloth traveled for the elite, the most transformative cargo of the ancient maritime world was often the most humble: seeds, saplings, and live animals. These were the agricultural staples that slowly, irrevocably reshaped entire landscapes and diets across continents. Consider the chicken. This bird, so utterly commonplace today, originated in the dense jungles of Southeast Asia, where it was first domesticated from the red jungle fowl. Yet by the first millennium before the Common Era, its bones begin appearing in archaeological sites along the coast of the Mediterranean. How did it get there? Not over the high mountain passes of Central Asia, but by ship. Traders moving along the maritime routes of the Indian Ocean and up the Red Sea carried these birds as a living food source, a novelty, or for ceremonial purposes. With each port call, a few birds might escape or be traded, and slowly, over generations of voyages, the chicken hopped from island to island and coast to coast until it became a global resident. Its journey is a perfect example of a silent biological exchange, facilitated entirely by those ancient sea lanes. This same process unfolded with plants that would become cornerstones of Western agriculture. The grapevine, essential for wine, and the olive tree, the source of precious oil, both have their origins in the region of the Levant. For the ancient civilizations of the Mediterranean, mastering the cultivation of these plants was an economic and cultural revolution. Wine and oil were not just food, they were major export commodities, stored in those ubiquitous clay amphorae that fill shipwrecks. The spread of these cultivated trees and vines westward to Greece, Italy, Spain, and North Africa followed the paths of Phoenician and Greek colonists. They carried cuttings and saplings with them, planting not just colonies but entire new agricultural ecosystems. The physical evidence of this trade is sometimes remarkably direct. In several ancient shipwrecks, archaeologists have sifted through the sediment in amphorae and found the preserved pits of olives, the very seeds of this agricultural expansion, traveling alongside the finished product. So pause for a moment and look at a modern meal. That piece of chicken, the olive oil dressing on a salad, the raisins in a pastry, even the citrus fruit for dessert, none of them are native to most of the world. They are all immigrants, their global journeys beginning not in the age of airplanes, but in the holds of wooden ships navigating by the stars. This is perhaps the most profound and personal legacy of those underwater trade routes. They quietly engineered a biological globalization, weaving together the flora and fauna of separate continents long before anyone had drawn a map of the whole world. The connections forged by ancient merchants did more than move objects. They rewrote the very menu of human civilization. And if plants and animals could travel such distances, what about the ideas that would shape how societies were governed? The very concepts of law, money, and communication that allowed these vast networks to function in the first place. The Rosetta Stone is more than a key to hieroglyphs. It is a monument to a world forced to speak to itself. This famous slab, inscribed with the same decree in three scripts, Greek, Demotic, and hieroglyphic, was created because the Ptolemaic rulers of Egypt needed to communicate with a diverse, interconnected population of Greeks, Egyptians, and others. It is a physical testament to a universal truth: when cultures collide through trade, they must find a common tongue. This need gave birth to the world's first international languages, the linguistic glue that held vast commercial networks together. In the bustling ports of the Near East, from the Levant to Mesopotamia, that language was Aramaic, originally the speech of a small Syrian people. It was adopted by the sprawling Assyrian and later Persian empires as the language of administration and commerce because its simple alphabetic script was far easier to learn and use than complex cuneiform. Aramean merchants carried it along every trade route, and it became the default language of business from Egypt to the borders of India, spoken in the markets and written on contracts for centuries. Later, following the conquests of Alexander the Great, another language sailed to supremacy, Koine Greek. This common dialect became the lingua franca of the entire Hellenistic world and the Roman East, the language in which a merchant from Alexandria could bargain with a supplier in the Black Sea or a ship's captain could read a port's regulations in Sicily. It was the software of Mediterranean trade, enabling not just the exchange of goods, but of philosophies, scientific ideas, and literature. But language itself had to travel, and its most revolutionary vehicle was the alphabet. Our very ability to read these words can be traced back to the holds of Phoenician merchant ships. Around 3,000 years ago, these master traders developed a streamlined writing system of about 22 consonants, a practical tool for keeping inventories and recording transactions. It was brilliant in its simplicity, far more accessible than the thousands of symbols in Egyptian hieroglyphs or Mesopotamian cuneiform. As Phoenician ships crisscrossed the Mediterranean, their alphabet went with them. The Greeks encountered it, likely at trading posts in places like Al-Mina on the Syrian coast. They adapted it, adding crucial vowels to better represent their own language. This Greek alphabet would then travel further, giving rise to the Latin script that forms the basis of English and many other modern languages. The journey from a Phoenician trader's ledger to the page of a book is a direct line, a cultural export as consequential as any shipment of purple dye or cedar wood. Listen closely to the words we use every day, and you can still hear the echo of ancient marketplaces. Many terms for exotic goods are themselves imports, borrowed long ago and naturalized. The English word sugar comes from the Sanskrit shakara, which traveled through Persian and Arabic to medieval Latin, a linguistic trail following the actual trade routes of the precious cane. Orange traces back through Old French and Italian to the Arabic naranj, itself from Persian and ultimately Sanskrit. Even a word as simple as cotton finds its roots in the Arabic qutan, reflecting the Indian textile trade that moved through the Islamic world. These are fossilized sounds, the preserved accents of countless forgotten merchants who first spoke the names of these novel things. So we must pause and reflect when you write a note, read a street sign, or savor a piece of fruit. How much of your daily life is built on linguistic foundations laid down by ancient sailors? Their quest for material wealth quietly built the very frameworks of our thought, proving that the most enduring cargo of all was not something that could be taxed or weighed, but the invisible architecture of communication itself. And if words and scripts could so fluidly cross oceans, what deeper, more personal beliefs were passengers on those same ships, ready to transform the spiritual landscape of every port they touched? Every merchant captain knew the horizon held more than just the promise of land. It could also bring the swift, low silhouette of a pirate galley, its oars churning the water as it closed in for attack. Piracy was not a rare catastrophe in the ancient world. It was a constant business expense, a shadow industry that thrived wherever valuable cargo moved across open water. From the enigmatic sea peoples whose raids contributed to the collapse of Bronze Age empires, to the Illyrian pirates of the Adriatic who preyed on Roman shipping, to the infamous Cilician pirates of the eastern Mediterranean who operated like a rival naval power, these raiders were an inescapable part of maritime life. Their existence forced every aspect of the trade network to adapt for survival. One of the most direct responses was the convoy system. Merchant ships, slow and heavy with cargo, would travel together in groups for mutual protection, much like caravans on land. Ports became not just marketplaces but fortresses, with massive walls, watchtowers, and chains that could be stretched across harbor entrances to bar unauthorized entry at night. The most valuable fleets, especially those carrying grain to feed Rome, were often escorted by warships, a clear display of state power protecting its economic lifelines. The threat was so pervasive it touched even the most famous figures. The young Julius Caesar, traveling to study rhetoric, was captured by Cilician pirates near the island of Pharmacusa. According to the historian Plutarch, Caesar treated his captors with such arrogant disdain, insisting they raise his ransom, that after he was freed and ransomed, he returned with a private fleet, captured them, and had them executed. This story underscores the blurred lines between law, power, and predation on the high seas. So we must ask, how did this ever-present danger shape the routes themselves? The need for security pushed trade onto predictable, well-patrolled pathways, often within sight of coastlines where refuge could be sought. It made merchants reliant on powerful states that could afford to police the sea lanes, effectively paying a tax, either in coin or in political allegiance, for the privilege of safe passage. The choice of a shipping route was never just about wind and current. It was a calculated risk assessment, weighing the value of the cargo against the reputation of the pirates known to haunt a particular strait or archipelago. This layer of danger and politics meant the smooth flow of goods was always underpinned by force, or the credible threat of it. The invisible highways of the ancient world were, in reality, guarded corridors, their openness secured by the reach of empires and the courage of crews who sailed knowing the sea's greatest peril often came not from storms but from other men. The monsoon winds did not merely blow, they commanded. For centuries, the entire economic rhythm of the Indian Ocean was set by these immense seasonal systems, a breath of the planet itself that reversed direction with a reliability ancient sailors could set their calendars by. From April to September, the southwest monsoon filled the sails of ships departing the Horn of Africa and Arabia, pushing them steadily toward the markets of India. Then, as the year turned, the winds reversed, becoming the northeast monsoon from October to March, carrying those same vessels, now laden with spices and silks, back home. This was not a force to be fought, but a partner to be understood. These predictable patterns transformed the Indian Ocean from a terrifying expanse into a navigable highway, enabling voyages of thousands of miles with a confidence that would be impossible in the fickle winds of other seas. As oceanographer Dr. Helen Chersky notes, the stability of these atmospheric patterns over millennia provided a framework upon which human civilization could build its first truly intercontinental trade networks. The monsoon was the original schedule, the invisible timetable that synchronized the movements of merchants from Rome to Tamil India. In the Mediterranean, a different but equally dependable system guided sailors. The Artesian winds, known today as the Meltemi, blow reliably from the north during the summer months, providing a natural propulsion for ships sailing south to Egypt or east along the coast of Anatolia. Meanwhile, the basin's dominant surface currents, like a great slow-moving river within the sea, created consistent pathways. A ship could catch the eastward flow along the southern Turkish coast, then ride the counter-clockwise circulation around the sea to return westward along North Africa. This deep environmental knowledge was a form of power. It fuels one of history's great speculative voyages, the possible Phoenician circumnavigation of Africa around 600 years before the Common Era, commissioned by the Egyptian pharaoh Necho. Ancient historians like Herodotus recorded the tale with skepticism, but modern understanding of currents lends it startling plausibility. Sailing south from the Red Sea, a crew would eventually pick up the northward flowing Agulhas current along Africa's east coast, and later the Bengla current flowing north along the west coast, natural aids that could have helped carry them through an unimaginable 3-year journey. Whether the voyage truly happened remains debated, but the very possibility underscores a profound truth. The greatest achievements of ancient maritime culture were not triumphs over nature, but collaborations with it. They learned to read the planet's own circulatory system, to harness its energy and pace their ambitions to its timeless rhythm. The routes we have been tracing were not drawn on charts, but discovered in the feel of the wind and the pull of the water, a dialogue between human curiosity and the ancient physical architecture of the world. If the environment provided the pathways and trade provided the motive, what was the mechanism that made it all work? The practical system of trust and value that allowed a merchant in one port to send his wealth across the sea to a partner he might never see again. The most enduring cargo of these ancient voyages was not silk or spice, but story. Long after a ship's timbers have dissolved and its port has silted over, the tales it inspired can live on, transforming into the myths and legends that shape our imagination of the past. Perhaps the greatest of these is the story of Atlantis. The philosopher Plato described it around 2,400 years ago, not as a historical record, but as a moral allegory, a powerful, advanced island nation that fell out of favor with the gods and sank beneath the sea in a single day and night. For centuries, people have searched for a literal lost continent. But what if the power of the Atlantis story comes from a collective memory of something real, the catastrophic collapse of a brilliant maritime civilization? Many historians and archaeologists see a compelling parallel in the Minoans of Crete. Here was a thalassocracy, a sea empire of astonishing sophistication, with its grand palaces, vibrant art, and far-flung trade networks. Then, around the middle of the second millennium before the Common Era, the volcanic island of Thera, just north of Crete, exploded in one of the largest eruptions in human history. The event would have been apocalyptic, triggering colossal tsunamis that would have devastated the northern coast of Crete, blanketing the island in ash and crippling its fleet and economy. The Minoan world, though it lingered for a time, never truly recovered, its power and knowledge fading into memory. Could the tale of a glorious island kingdom that sank beneath the waves be a folk memory, passed down for generations and eventually reshaped by Plato into his philosophical parable? It is a haunting possibility that the myth preserves a kernel of historical trauma, the sudden, violent end of a great trading power that once connected the ancient world. Atlantis is not alone in this. Consider the Egyptian land of Punt, a place shrouded in equal parts mystery and lavish description. For over 1,000 years, Egyptian texts and temple reliefs celebrate expeditions to this distant land, reached by sailing down the Red Sea. They describe Punt as a divine land of wonders, rich with fragrant myrrh and frankincense trees, ebony, gold, and exotic animals. The famous reliefs at the Temple of Hatshep show the queen's ships returning, their decks piled high with these treasures, even showing the potted myrrh saplings brought back to Egypt. For a long time, scholars debated Punt's location, placing it anywhere from the Horn of Africa to the southern Arabian Peninsula. The point is not its precise coordinates, but what the legend represents. Punt was the ultimate symbol of the rewards of long-distance maritime trade, a semi-mythical source of unimaginable wealth reached only by the most daring sea journeys. Its story, repeated for centuries, served to glorify the pharaohs who mounted these expeditions and to enshrine in cultural memory the awe and prosperity that came from mastering the sea lanes. So we are left with a profound question. How do these enduring myths, from a sunken continent to a fabled land of fragrance, serve as vessels for historical truth? They are not factual records, but they are emotional ones. They preserve the scale and the wonder, the peril and the promise that defined the age of ancient seafaring. They remind us that for our ancestors, the ocean was a place of both boundless opportunity and unimaginable danger, where entire civilizations could rise from trade and just as suddenly vanish beneath the waves. The stories are the cultural echo of the networks we have been tracing, a testament to how deeply those watery highways were woven into the fabric of the ancient mind. A ship's hold was a library of the possible. Alongside amphorae of wine and sacks of grain, the most transformative cargo was intangible, the collective knowledge of how to build, grow, and create. This was the true engine of progress, a quiet exchange of techniques and ideas that flowed along the same maritime highways as tangible goods. Consider the simple but revolutionary shadaf, a counterweighted irrigation tool. First developed along the banks of the Tigris and Euphrates in Mesopotamia, this device allowed farmers to lift water from rivers and canals with far greater efficiency. Its design did not stay confined to one river valley. Through contact along Persian Gulf and overland routes that connected to the Indus River system, the concept of the shadaf traveled. Archaeologists find evidence of sophisticated water lifting techniques and canal networks in the Indus Valley cities, suggesting a sharing of hydraulic engineering principles that allowed civilizations to master their environments. This was not the movement of a physical object, but the transfer of a solution, a better way of doing something essential. The same process unfolded with architecture on a grand scale. As Greek merchants and colonists established ports across the Mediterranean and Black Sea, they did not just bring pottery and olive oil, they brought a visual language of stone. The distinctive form of the Greek temple, with its columned facades and triangular pediments, became a marker of Hellenistic culture. But this style did not remain static, it adapted and was adopted. In places like Ai Khanoum, a city founded in ancient Bactria, in what is now Afghanistan, archaeologists have uncovered a remarkable fusion. Here, at the crossroads of Greek and Persian influence, stood a gymnasium and a theater of purely Greek design, yet the palace incorporated Central Asian architectural layouts. The very techniques of stone masonry, the knowledge of how to carve and set massive blocks, traveled with the stonemasons and engineers who followed trade and conquest, leaving a hybrid architectural legacy thousands of miles from Athens. Perhaps no technological transfer was more vital than the art of metallurgy. Bronze is not a naturally occurring metal, it is an invention, an alloy of copper and tin that requires precise knowledge of proportions, temperatures, and processes. The discovery that these two soft metals could be combined to create a material harder than either was a breakthrough that happened in several places. But the refinement of the technique, the specialized knowledge of furnace design, mold making, and alloying became a highly valued craft. It is unlikely that tons of finished bronze ingots alone fueled the Bronze Age. The knowledge itself had to move. Skilled smiths were as mobile as the metals they worked. A master metalworker from Anatolia might find patronage in the court of an Egyptian pharaoh, bringing with him not just his tools but his entire mental catalogue of techniques. The result is visible in the archaeological record, where artifact styles and metallurgical compositions show a blending of traditions, proving that the know-how traveled alongside the raw ore. This diffusion of innovation is perfectly captured in the evolution of the sail. For centuries, Mediterranean ships relied on square sails, effective for running before the wind, but limited in their ability to sail across or into it. Then a new design appears in the Mediterranean around the late Roman period, the lateen sail. This triangular sail, mounted on a long, angled yard, is a masterpiece of nautical engineering. It allows a ship to tack against the wind, vastly increasing its maneuverability and range. Its origin points east to the Indian Ocean and Arabian Sea, where Arab and Indian sailors had been using similar rigs for centuries to master the monsoon winds. The lateen sail did not arrive in a vacuum. It was introduced through the sustained contact of trade in the Red Sea and the Indian Ocean, likely observed and adopted by Mediterranean sailors who recognized its superior utility. This single piece of technology, transferred from one maritime world to another, would go on to power the voyages of the age of exploration over 1,000 years later. So we must pause and reconsider a common assumption. We often picture ancient innovation as a spark that flashes in isolation, a genius invention that belongs to one culture alone. But the evidence of the seas tells a different story. The development of irrigation, architecture, metallurgy, and navigation was a networked, collaborative process, accelerated by the constant hum of contact in port cities and the shared challenges of the deep. A merchant ship was a conduit for conversation as much as commerce, carrying the questions of one land and returning with the answers from another. What we call cultural achievement was rarely a solitary triumph, but more often a tapestry, woven from threads gathered across the watery expanse of the ancient world. And if ideas could travel so freely, what about the people themselves, the ordinary sailors, merchants, and artisans whose lives were spent in motion between worlds? The vastness of the open sea was a challenge of both distance and logistics. A ship laden with heavy cargo could only carry so much fresh water and food before its own supplies became a burden. This simple fact of maritime life turned certain dots of land into the most valuable real estate in the ancient world, the essential stepping stones that made the entire network function. Islands like Cyprus, overflowing with copper ore, or the Maldives, whose beaches were littered with small, glossy cowrie shells, became more than just sources of raw materials. They transformed into vital way stations, the gas stations and rest stops of the ancient seas. A merchant vessel sailing from the Levant to the Aegean would plan its route to hug the coast of Anatolia, but a direct crossing from Egypt to mainland Greece was a daunting prospect. The solution was to island hop, using the Cycladic islands as a chain of natural piers. Each island offered a safe harbor to ride out a sudden storm, a beach to careen and repair a hull, and a chance to replenish freshwater supplies from local springs. More than that, they became neutral ground, bustling marketplaces where ships from different cultures, following different routes, could converge, exchange news, and barter goods before sailing on. The geography of trade was not just about the destination, it was about the points in between. A long journey was not one impossible leap, but a series of manageable steps, and these intermediate islands made each step possible. They lowered the risk, increased the range, and created pockets of incredible cultural fusion. One of the most striking examples lies off the coast of the Greek island of Kyros. Today, it is a tiny, uninhabited rock called Daskalio, but over 4,500 years ago, during the Cycladic period, this place was a humming center of industry and spirituality. Archaeologists discovered that the entire summit of the island was artificially terraced with stone brought by boat from another island miles away. On these terraces, they found evidence of advanced metalworking on an industrial scale, with furnaces, slag, and molds for producing bronze tools and weapons. This was not a simple village, it was a specialized metallurgical hub, processing copper and other ores that were likely imported from as far away as the eastern Mediterranean. At the same time, the site was clearly a major ceremonial center, with countless broken marble figurines deliberately deposited in a single location. Think about that for a moment. A remote islet transformed by human effort into a factory and a temple, attracting raw materials, skilled workers, and pilgrims from across the seas. Daskalio was a node, a place where the practical need for metal intersected with deep spiritual belief, all made possible by its position along maritime routes. Similarly, the cowrie shells of the Maldives tell a story of abstract value traveling incredible distances. These small, durable shells, harvested from the Indian Ocean, became one of the world's first widespread forms of shell money. Their uniform shape and difficulty to counterfeit made them ideal. From the Maldives, they were shipped in bulk to India, then carried overland or by sea all the way to West Africa, where they were used as currency for centuries, even into the modern era. The islands that produced them became linchpins in a financial network that spanned hemispheres, their beaches literally minting the coin of the realm for distant continents. So we see a pattern, from the copper-rich mountains of Cyprus supplying the Bronze Age to the shell beaches of the Maldives, enabling transcontinental commerce. These intermediate locations did more than just provide resources, they provided the rhythm. They broke the monolithic silence of a months-long voyage into a series of chapters, each with a chance to rest, refit, and exchange not just cargo but stories and ideas. The global network was not a single thread but a chain, and its strength depended entirely on these individual links. This raises a fascinating question. If the nodes were so critical, who managed the flow of goods through them, and what happened when the delicate balance of trust that held these far-flung partnerships together began to fray? The constant hum of the ancient maritime network was not destined to last forever. Like a coastline reshaped by a slow tide, the geography of global connection began to change, pulled by new centers of gravity on land. The rise of vast, consolidated empires such as Rome in the west and the Han Dynasty in the east subtly altered the flow of trade. These were territorial giants whose power was anchored in the control of land, armies, and agricultural heartlands. For them, the sea remained vital, but it was often just one artery among many. The Roman Empire, for instance, famously relied on Egyptian grain shipped across the Mediterranean to feed its capital, but it also invested in massive road networks and internal markets that made overland trade within its borders more secure and efficient. Similarly, the Han Dynasty expanded its control along the Silk Road's land corridors, establishing protectorates and securing the caravan routes that brought jade, horses, and glass from Central Asia. This shift toward imperial, land-based control began to internalize and formalize trade that had once flowed through a more decentralized, multipolar web of independent ports and merchants. External pressures also played a role. Shifts in climate patterns could render once reliable ports unusable, silting up harbors or altering river courses that served as gateways to the sea. Political instability in key regions could make certain sea lanes too dangerous, pushing commerce onto alternative paths. We can see a telling snapshot of this changing, struggling system in a remarkable document from the late Roman Empire. In the year 301, Emperor Diocletian issued what is known as the Edict on Maximum Prices. It was a desperate attempt to control runaway inflation by decreeing the maximum prices for thousands of goods and services across the empire, from a soldier's wage to the cost of a pound of pork or a sea voyage from Alexandria to Rome. The very existence of this edict, with its incredibly detailed lists, reveals an economy of staggering complexity, one that had grown from those ancient maritime roots into an interconnected, fragile machine. It also shows an empire trying, and ultimately failing, to command by law the economic forces that the open sea had once nurtured more organically. As the classical world transitioned into the medieval era, the map of connection was redrawn but not erased. The great overland Silk Road routes, often safer under the stability of empires like the Tang in China or the Islamic Caliphates, saw a surge in prominence. Yet the sea lanes never fell silent, they transformed. The knowledge of the monsoon winds, the locations of ports, the designs of ships, all this hard-won wisdom was not lost. It was inherited. Arab and Persian merchants became the new masters of the Indian Ocean trade, using larger vessels called housed with lateen sails to move goods between East Africa, India, and China with even greater efficiency. In the Mediterranean, while the unified Roman economy fractured, the Venetian and Byzantine empires would later build their fortunes on the same basic blueprint, controlling the sea lanes between Europe and the East. So did these ancient global networks truly disappear? They did not vanish so much as they evolved, their patterns adapting to new political realities and passing into new hands. The decentralized, exploratory spirit of the Phoenician or Minoan trader gave way to more systematic, often state-sponsored commerce. The routes themselves, however, remained, etched into the collective memory of sailors and the very currents of the ocean. They were the prototype, the first draft of globalization. When the Portuguese explorer Vasco da Gama finally rounded the Cape of Good Hope in 1497, aiming to reach India, he was not discovering a new world. He was stumbling onto the final, forgotten piece of an ancient one, plugging back into a network that had been operational for millennia. His voyage was less an invention and more a rediscovery, a late chapter in a story that began with cedar ships carrying purple dye and sailors reading the stars. This continuity forces us to ask a final, perhaps surprising question. If the physical network persisted, what about the deeper philosophical impact of all that centuries-long exchange? What world view did this constant contact create in the minds of the ancient people who lived within it, and how did it shape their understanding of their place in the world? The ancient world's watery highways are now being mapped with tools its sailors could never have dreamed of. Today's marine archaeologists wield a silent, high-tech arsenal to peer into the deep. Side-scan sonar paints detailed acoustic images of the seabed, revealing the ghostly outlines of hulls and amphory fields without disturbing a single grain of sand. Remotely operated vehicles, or ROVs, descend where humans cannot, their robotic arms and high-definition cameras delicately probing shipwrecks in the crushing darkness of the abyss. Advanced diving suits extend the time researchers can spend on the bottom, turning minutes of exploration into hours of meticulous documentation. This technological leap stands in stark contrast to the humble beginnings of the field, often sparked by the keen eyes of sponge divers and fishermen who, for generations, accidentally brought up pieces of the past with their catches. Their discoveries were serendipitous treasures, but today's work is a deliberate science of light and sound, systematically uncovering the sunken geography of ancient trade. One of the most profound demonstrations of this modern approach is the Black Sea Maritime Archaeology project. Its researchers made a discovery that seems to defy time itself. The Black Sea's deepest waters are anoxic, meaning they contain no oxygen. In this sterile environment, the wood-eating organisms that normally devour a sunken ship within decades simply cannot survive. The result is a collection of shipwrecks so perfectly preserved they look as if they sank yesterday. The project has located vessels from the Ottoman, Byzantine, Roman, and even Greek periods, their wooden masts, rudders, and coiled ropes still intact, resting upright on the seabed as if waiting for their crew to return. To see a 2,400-year-old Greek trading ship, its form unmistakable in the sonar scan, is to witness a moment frozen, as maritime archaeologist Dr. Helen Farr, who worked on the project, describes it. The experience is like using a time machine. The technology allows us to visit these ships in a non-invasive way, to study their construction and cargo without removing them from their resting place, gaining insights into the ancient shipwright's mind that a single salvaged artifact could never provide. This marriage of ancient discovery and modern innovation creates a powerful dialogue across millennia. We are now able to scientifically map the very routes that were once known only through experience and oral tradition. By plotting the locations of multiple shipwrecks along a coastline, analysts can begin to trace the most frequented lanes, the dangerous points where storms often struck, and the sheltered bays favored for anchorage. Chemical analysis of cargo residues tells us not just what was traded, but where it was grown or manufactured. Adding precise data points to our understanding of economic flow. The technological lens we now employ does more than just find lost ships. It decodes the logic of the entire network. It allows us to see the ancient mariners' ingenuity reflected in our own, connecting the star-based wayfinding of the past with the satellite-guided mapping of the present. Both are attempts to solve the same fundamental human challenge: how to navigate, connect, and understand our place in a vast and often indifferent world. With this new cartography of the deep finally taking shape, we must ask what these meticulously gathered details are ultimately revealing, not just about trade, but about the people whose lives were defined by these journeys. That intricate web of sea lanes was not merely a collection of isolated journeys, but the living architecture of the first globalized world. Historians and archaeologists now describe it as an ancient world system, a complex network of interdependence where events in one corner could send tremors through the entire structure. Consider the Late Bronze Age collapse, a period around 1200 years before the Common Era, when major civilizations from Mycenaean Greece to the Hittite Empire in Anatolia and the powerful city-states of Canaan experienced a sudden, dramatic decline. Palaces burned, writing systems vanished, and trade routes fell silent. For a long time, this was seen as a series of separate local disasters, but the maritime evidence tells a different story. The shipwrecks from this period, like the one at Uluburun, reveal a tightly linked economy. A disruption in the tin mines of Afghanistan or the copper supplies of Cyprus would not just inconvenience a local king, it would cripple bronze production across 3 continents. A wave of political instability disrupting ports in the Levant would sever the flow of luxury goods that maintained diplomatic alliances everywhere else. The collapse was not a coincidence of separate failures, but a systemic failure, a domino effect that traveled along those very trade routes that had once brought prosperity. The fragility of this early globalization is a powerful lesson in interconnection, showing that even ancient societies were bound together by strands of mutual need that, when pulled too tight, could unravel spectacularly. This interdependence was driven by something remarkably familiar: consumer demand. A wealthy Roman citizen's desire for black pepper, a status symbol and a preservative, did not just create a market. It set in motion a chain of production and transport that stretched across the known world. That demand is what motivated Indian farmers to cultivate more pepper vines, Arabian middlemen to organize caravans to ports, and Egyptian shippers to brave the monsoon winds. The Roman silver coins found in hoards across southern India are the direct physical evidence of this economic pull. Similarly, the appetite for Chinese silk in the markets of Rome and Persia fueled not only the overland Silk Road but also the bustling maritime networks that carried it from Indian ports. The production decisions of a farmer in the Ganges Delta or a silk weaver in Han China were subtly influenced by the tastes of consumers they would never meet, living in cities whose names they might never have heard. This was a truly globalized market in miniature, where desire in one hemisphere stimulated labor in another, connected by the courage of sailors and the capacity of ships. It forces us to reconsider the timeline of our interconnected world. Globalization did not begin with steamships and telegraph cables in the 19th century, nor even with European sailing ships in the 16th. Its prototype was operational millennia earlier, moving at the speed of sail and wind, but moving nonetheless. So we are left with a reflective question about our own era. Is our modern global economy, with its instant communication and container ships, fundamentally different from these ancient patterns, or is it simply the same phenomenon operating at a vastly increased speed and scale? The core mechanisms look strikingly similar. We still build networks of specialized production, where a single product might be assembled from components sourced from a dozen different countries. We are still profoundly interdependent, where a political decision or a natural event in one region can trigger economic shocks worldwide, just as the Bronze Age collapse did. Our consumer choices still drive production and environmental impact on the other side of the planet, much like the Roman taste for pepper-shaped landscapes in India. The difference, of course, is one of velocity and visibility. Information and goods now move in hours or days, not months or years, compressing the consequences of our interconnectedness and making them feel more immediate. Yet the underlying principle remains: human societies have always sought connection, and through that connection, they weave systems of exchange and dependency. Recognizing this long history reframes our present moment. We are not experiencing a sudden, unprecedented condition, but rather the latest, most intense chapter in a very old story. The ancient mariners who traded Lapis Lazuli and amber were participating in the same essential human project as we are today, building a world where distance is no barrier to exchange. Their legacy is not just in the shipwrecks we discover, but in the very idea that our fates can be, and always have been, linked across the deep. The same ocean currents that preserved these shipwrecks for millennia now threaten to erase them. Sunken history faces a modern gauntlet of dangers, from fishing trawlers whose heavy nets drag across the seabed, shattering delicate timbers and scattering artifacts, to looters armed with advanced technology who plunder sites for profit, destroying their archaeological context forever. Even the chemistry of the sea itself is changing, as ocean acidification can accelerate the corrosion of metal and dissolve ancient materials. These sites are non-renewable resources, each one a unique page in a global story, and they are vanishing before we can fully read them. This presents a profound ethical dilemma for archaeologists, a choice between two paths. The first is excavation, carefully raising artifacts and even entire ships for conservation and display in museums. The second is in situ preservation, leaving the site untouched on the seabed, monitoring it, and perhaps creating underwater parks for managed public access. Each approach has merit. Excavation can rescue a site from immediate destruction and allow for intensive study, but it is incredibly costly, can damage artifacts during recovery, and removes them from their environment. In situ preservation protects the site's integrity and allows for future study with better technology, but it leaves it vulnerable to the very threats we hope to mitigate. This global challenge led to the creation of a landmark international agreement. In 2001, UNESCO adopted the Convention on the Protection of the Underwater Cultural Heritage. Its core principles are simple but revolutionary. They prioritize preservation in place, discourage commercial exploitation, and promote international cooperation. The convention frames these wrecks not as treasure troves for the first finder, but as part of humanity's shared heritage, deserving of careful stewardship. The tension between these ideals and reality can be seen in two famous shipwrecks. The wreck of the HMS Victory, a British warship lost in 1744, was the subject of a contentious commercial salvage operation that raised cannon and other artifacts for auction, a move heavily criticized by archaeologists who argued it prioritized profit over knowledge. In contrast, the wreck of the RMS Titanic, though discovered earlier, now receives some protection under international agreement, designating it as a memorial site and regulating visits to prevent further degradation. These cases force us to confront a difficult question: who truly owns the past when it lies in international waters, on the seabed that belongs to no single nation? Is it the cultural descendant of the people who built the ship, the country whose flag it flew, the finder, or all of humanity? The answer shapes how we act. If we see a Phoenician cargo ship as merely an ancient vessel, it might be looted for its amphorae. But if we see it as a vital piece of a story that connects continents, its protection becomes a global responsibility. The race is on to document these fragile time capsules with non-invasive technology, creating detailed digital records before they are altered or lost. This work is not about locking the past away, but about ensuring that future generations, with tools we cannot yet imagine, will still have a chance to learn from these silent witnesses. How we choose to protect these sunken chapters today will determine what stories we are able to tell tomorrow. The story of these underwater highways is far from complete, its final chapters still resting in the dark. For every shipwreck we have mapped, 1,000 more likely lie undiscovered, and with them, answers to questions that continue to haunt historians. Did the Minoans, those masterful Bronze Age navigators, ever sail beyond the Pillars of Hercules and reach the shores of the Americas? Some point to tantalizing, though highly contested, archaeological anomalies, like potential Minoan-style artifacts in unlikely places, but the concrete proof remains submerged, waiting for a sonar signature or a distinctive pottery shard to settle the debate. Similarly, we are only beginning to understand the true scale of Polynesian exploration. While we know they settled islands across the Pacific, did their incredible voyaging canoes make contact with the civilizations of South America centuries before Europeans? Genetic studies of sweet potatoes and linguistic clues hint at a profound possibility: a pre-Columbian meeting of two worlds in the middle of the Pacific, a story whose details are lost to the waves. Then there are the legendary ports known only from texts like the biblical Ophir, a place of unimaginable gold and riches visited by the ships of King Solomon. Scholars have proposed locations from Africa to India, but its true identity remains one of history's great geographical puzzles, a ghost on the ancient charts. The most promising frontiers for discovery are not even on our modern maps. During the last ice age, sea levels were over 100 meters lower than they are today. Vast stretches of coastline that were dry land, home to early human communities, now lie submerged on the continental shelves. These drowned landscapes are the ultimate time capsules, potentially holding evidence of seafaring that pushes our timeline back thousands of years earlier than we currently accept. Did people navigate these vanished shores, moving along routes that are now deep underwater? The only way to find out is to look. This is where the next generation of exploration begins, not with divers but with machines. Autonomous underwater vehicles, or a UVS, are now being deployed like underwater drones, programmed to methodically scan thousands of square miles of seabed with high-resolution sonar. They can operate in deep water and rough conditions, creating detailed three-dimensional maps of the ocean floor that may reveal not just shipwrecks, but the subtle outlines of drowned settlements, ancient fishing weirs, or ceremonial sites now claimed by the sea. An international team is planning an expedition to one such submerged landscape in the Baltic Sea, an area that was a fertile lakeland when humans first arrived. There a UVS will search for the faint traces of campsites or tools, evidence that could rewrite the story of how our ancestors interacted with the post-Ice Age world. Another project aims to scan the seabed off the coast of India, searching for the lost port of Muziris, a legendary hub of the Roman spice trade that vanished after a catastrophic flood. Each of these missions is a gamble, a high-tech search for a needle in a haystack at the bottom of the ocean. Yet, the potential reward is a fundamental shift in our understanding. The next incredible find might be a perfectly preserved Paleolithic canoe, a merchant vessel from a dynasty we thought was landlocked, or an entire sunken trading outpost with its warehouses intact. The ocean has kept its secrets for millennia, but we are finally developing the eyes to see them. So the next time you look out at the sea, remember that its horizon is not a limit, but an invitation. The greatest museum on Earth is still open for discovery, and its next exhibit is waiting for the right beam of light or the right signal from a robot to finally emerge from the dark. What do you think they will find? The wisdom of those ancient mariners offers a quiet blueprint for our own turbulent times. Their networks were not just about moving goods, they were masterclasses in resilience. When a storm closed one route, they knew another. When a port fell into conflict, they established trade with a different community. Their system thrived on diversity and adaptability, on never putting all their cargo in one fragile hull. This stands in stark contrast to the hyper-efficient, centralized supply chains of our modern world, where a single blockage in a narrow waterway or a disruption at one major port can ripple into global shortages. The ancient model whispers a crucial lesson: redundancy is not inefficiency, it is survival. True strength lies in having multiple pathways, in fostering a web of connections rather than a single, vulnerable strand. Their success was also rooted in a profound form of cultural intelligence. To trade across vast distances, they had to be more than merchants. They had to be diplomats, linguists, and keen observers of foreign custom. They built trust across linguistic and cultural barriers, creating partnerships that lasted generations. In an era often marked by conflict, these maritime highways were channels of mutual benefit, proving that interconnection could be a source of stability and innovation rather than just competition. This ancient perspective challenges a modern assumption that faster connection is inherently better connection. For them, connection was slow, physical, and earned. It required reading the environment, building personal relationships, and understanding that the journey itself was as important as the destination. Today, we are reviving their very methods to address contemporary challenges. Schools in Hawaii and across Polynesia are formally teaching the art of wayfinding, not as a historical curiosity, but as a powerful tool for environmental education. To navigate by the stars, the swells, and the birds, you must first learn to observe the natural world with exquisite attention. This ancient knowledge fosters a deep, intuitive sense of stewardship, a feeling of being part of an ecosystem rather than merely moving through it. It reconnects us to a tangible reality that our digital maps have abstracted. So we are left with a final, reflective question for our age of instant global links. Our connections today are faster and broader than any Phoenician sailor could have dreamed, but are they as deep? We can communicate across the planet in a blink, yet we often understand less about the cultures and environments on the other side of that screen. The ancient networks show us that sustainable connection is built on patience, observation, and reciprocity. It is built not just on moving information, but on sharing tangible value and respecting the rhythms of the world that carries it. In our pursuit of ever greater speed and efficiency, what essential wisdom about true resilience might we be leaving behind in the silent depths? The silent world beneath the waves is not a graveyard, but a library. Its shelves are the silt-covered hulls of ancient ships, its texts are the scattered cargo of amphorae and ingots, and its story is one of profound connection. We have journeyed across oceans of time, tracing how these underwater trade routes served as the silent arteries of the ancient world. Long before a single global map was drawn, they were already pumping the lifeblood of civilization, goods, ideas, and innovations between shores that seemed impossibly distant. From the engineered docks of Lothal in the Indus Valley to the sunken customs houses of Heracleion in Egypt, from the golden amber of the Baltic to the celestial blue Lapis Lazuli of Afghanistan, these networks reveal a hidden truth. Our ancestors were not isolated. They were interdependent, linked by a web of maritime ingenuity that turned the great seas into highways. this history challenges a narrow view of human progress. It shows us that cultural achievement was rarely a solitary spark, but more often a flame passed from one hand to another across the water. The chicken on your plate, the alphabet you are reading, the concept of money in your pocket, all of these began journeys on those ancient star-guided voyages. The networks thrived on a resilient logic of redundancy and cultural intelligence, building multiple pathways and fostering trust across vast divides. They remind us that our modern globalized world is not a sudden invention, but the latest, fastest chapter in a very old story of human connection. So the next time you stand at the edge of the sea, look beyond the horizon. Each wave that crashes on the shore today may be washing over the forgotten stones of a Phoenician dye works, the submerged foundation of a Minoan warehouse, or the final resting place of a Roman grain ship. These are not just relics, they are the physical echoes of a world that dreamed, traded, and connected on a scale that still inspires awe. The dreams of those ancient empires did not sink with their ships, they simply transformed, their legacy flowing into the currents of history that shaped our present. If this exploration of our submerged past resonated with you, we invite you to dive deeper. Subscribe for more journeys into the world's historical mysteries. And let us know in the comments below which ancient trade, good or maritime culture fascinates you the most, the purple of Tyre, the pepper of India, or the navigational stars of the Polynesians. The depths still hold countless secrets, and the next great discovery is always waiting just beyond the reach of the light.